Hello everyone, welcome to Payback. Before we dive into today's story, subscribe to the channel, hit bell icon.
Mom hid my $32,000 scholarship check. She gave it to my sister for a vacation, not for tuition, not for books, not for anything that had to do with me. A vacation. I found out by accident, and when I did, I didn't scream. I didn't cry in front of anyone. I didn't confront her in the kitchen with shaking hands. I sat with it. I thought about it. Then I did something quiet, something calm, something that changed everything. But before I tell you what I did, you need to understand where I came from. You need to understand the years that led up to that moment, because this was not a single mistake. This was a pattern, and patterns don't break on their own. Someone has to break them. Stay with me, because this story does not end where you think it does. My name is Nadia. I grew up in a mid-sized city where the winters lasted too long and the summers never quite made up for them. My family was not poor, but we were not comfortable either. We lived in that in-between space where there was always enough to eat, but never quite enough to breathe. My father worked in logistics, long hours, short patience, home late most nights. My mother managed the household and made every financial decision. That was just how it was. No one questioned it. I certainly didn't. Not for a long time. I am the older of two daughters. My sister, Priya, is 3 years younger than me. From the outside, we looked like a normal family. Two girls, modest home, parents who went to school events and made lunches and drove us to Saturday activities. But the inside of a family is never the same as the outside. You know that. Anyone who has grown up with siblings knows there is always a dynamic, an unspoken arrangement, a way things work that nobody announces but everyone understands. In our family, the unspoken arrangement was simple. Priya was the favorite. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I used to, but now I just say it plainly, the way you would say the sky is gray on a rainy day, not with anger, just as a fact. Priya was younger, softer, louder about her needs. She cried more easily. She asked for things directly, and my mother responded to that. My mother liked being needed. She liked being the one who fixed things, who provided things, who made the unhappy child smile. I was not that child. I was quiet. I handled things. I asked for very little because I had learned early that asking for things created tension. So I stopped asking. I studied. I worked hard at school not because anyone pushed me to, but because it felt like the one place where effort was directly rewarded. If I studied, I got good marks. If I got good marks, I advanced. If I advanced, I had options. Options felt like the most important thing in the world to me. I collected them quietly, like someone storing food for a long winter. By the time I was in my final year of secondary school, I had built something real. I had a strong academic record, letters of recommendation from two teachers who genuinely believed in me, and an application that I had worked on for months. I applied for the Regional Academic Excellence Scholarship. It was competitive. Only 12 were awarded each year across the entire district. The grant covered 2 full years of university tuition, plus a housing stipend. Total value, $32,000. I applied without telling anyone, not because I was hiding it, but because I had learned not to announce things before they happened. In my family, announced hopes had a way of becoming ammunition. If you told someone you wanted something and then didn't get it, the disappointment became a story they could tell later. So I stayed quiet. I applied, I waited, and 3 months later I received the letter. I had been selected. I read it 4 times standing at the mailbox, then I folded it and put it in my coat pocket and walked back inside. I felt something enormous, but I kept it inside my chest like a warm stone. I told my mother that evening. I expected surprise, maybe even pride. What I got was something I could not quite name at the time. She smiled, she hugged me, she said the right things, but there was something underneath it, a tightness, a pause before the smile that was just a half second too long. I noticed it, but I told myself I was imagining things. I was 18 and I had just won $32,000 for my education. Surely I was imagining things. The scholarship letter explained that the check would be mailed to the home address within 6 to 8 weeks. The funds were meant to be deposited into an account in the student's name and used for educational expenses. The letter was very clear about that. Educational expenses only. I made a copy of the letter. I put the original in a folder with my other important papers. I went back to finishing school, preparing for graduation, making plans. 6 weeks passed, then 7, then 8. I asked my mother one evening if the check had arrived. She said not yet. She said these things take time. She said I should be patient. I was patient. I was always patient. 2 more weeks passed. I asked again. She said she would check with the scholarship office. She said maybe there had been a delay. She said not to worry. I believed her. I had no reason not to. She was my mother. And then I found out the truth. Not from her. From my cousin Rima, who has never been good at keeping secrets, who talks the way some people breathe, constantly and without much awareness. She called me on a Tuesday afternoon to congratulate me, not on the scholarship, on the vacation. She said she had seen Priya's photos on social media. She said the resort looked beautiful. She asked if I had gone too. I said I didn't know what she was talking about. There was a pause. Rima said, "Oh." Then she said something clumsy, trying to cover it. She said she must have misunderstood something. She said, "Forget it. It's nothing." But I could hear it in her voice, the shape of what she had accidentally revealed. I said, "Rima, tell me what you saw." She told me. Priya had posted photos from a resort 3 hours away, a long weekend trip, a nice hotel, spa treatments, dinners that cost more than our weekly groceries, posted 3 days ago, while I had been sitting here waiting for a check that was now 10 weeks overdue. I hung up the phone. I sat very still. The house was quiet. My mother was in the kitchen. I could hear the sounds of dinner being prepared, the scrape of a pan, the running tap, the small domestic sounds that had been the background music of my entire life. I sat with what I now knew. I didn't go to the kitchen. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, in my room, with this new knowledge pressing against the inside of my chest. And the questions started coming. Did she know the check had arrived? Of course she did. She managed all the household mail. Nothing arrived without going through her first. Had she opened it? Almost certainly. Had she spent it? Rima's words played back in my head. The resort, the spa, the dinners. Where had that money come from if not from my check? My family did not have that kind of money sitting around. We never had. And then the question that sat beneath all the others, heavy and still, like something at the bottom of a lake. Had she done this on purpose? I want to take a moment here, because that last question is the one that changed everything. Not the act itself, as terrible as it was, but the intention behind it. Because people make mistakes with money, people misunderstand terms and conditions, people confuse funds, people make errors. That happens, but this was not an error. The scholarship letter had been explicit, educational expenses only, deposited in the student's name, my name. She had read that letter. She had understood it. And then she had made a choice, not a mistake, a choice. That distinction mattered to me enormously. It still does. I did not go to my mother that night. I did not confront her over dinner. I did not send a message to Priya asking what she knew. I went to sleep, or tried to, and I thought about what to do. By morning, I had decided on one thing. I needed facts before I acted, not assumptions, not emotions. Facts. I called the scholarship office the next morning. I explained that I was the recipient and that I had not yet received my check. I gave them my name and my reference number from the original letter. The woman on the phone was helpful. She checked her records. She said the check had been issued 8 weeks ago. She said it had been cashed. She gave me the date. I wrote it down. I thanked her. I hung up. Then I sat with that date. The check had been cashed 2 weeks after it arrived. 2 weeks after my mother had looked me in the eye and said, "Not yet, these things take time." 2 weeks. She had looked at me. She had said those words, and the check was already gone. Let me tell you what that felt like. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter and colder. Like standing in a room and slowly realizing that the walls have been painted to look like windows, that what you thought was a view of the outside was just a very good painting of one, that you have been looking at an image of sky and light for your entire life and calling it real. That is what it felt like. Not betrayal in the sharp, sudden way, betrayal in the slow way, the way that makes you look back and see all the other times differently. I thought about the birthday money that had never quite reached me, that had always been folded into family expenses before I could touch it. I thought about the part-time job I had taken at 16 and how my wages had gone into a family account that I never had direct access to. I thought about small things. The way compliments for my achievements were often redirected, the way my mother talked about my future as something abstract and distant, while she talked about Priya's future as something immediate and real and worth investing in now. I thought about it all, and I understood that this was not a new pattern. This was the same pattern I had been living inside my whole life. I had just never seen the full shape of it before. Now I could. And now I had to decide what to do with that clarity. Here's what I knew. I was 18. I was about to start university. I had no money for tuition because the money that had been designated for my tuition had been spent on a vacation. I had a copy of the original scholarship letter. I had the date the check was cashed. I had the information from the scholarship office. And I had something else. Something my mother did not know I had. 4 months earlier, before any of this had happened, I had opened my own bank account, a student account at the credit union near the university campus. I had opened it in preparation for receiving the scholarship funds. I had intended to ask my mother to direct the check there once it arrived. Obviously, I never got that chance. But the account existed. It was in my name only. No one else had access. And because I had opened it directly with the credit union using my own identification, my mother had no knowledge of it at all. I had never mentioned it, not because I had been hiding it, simply because there had been no reason to bring it up yet. Now, there was a reason. But let me explain something about the week that followed, because it was not a week of action. It was a week of sitting with what I knew and deciding very carefully what kind of person I wanted to be in response to it. I was angry. That is too mild a word, actually. I felt something deeper than anger, something that had weight to it. I felt the particular grief of realizing that someone who should have protected you has been quietly redirecting what was yours. That is not just anger. That is a specific kind of loss. And I sat with it. I did not call my aunts. I did not post anything online. I did not talk to friends. I sat with it alone, which was something I had learned to do very well over many years. I asked myself questions. What did I actually want from this situation? Did I want acknowledgement? Did I want apology? Did I want to hurt someone the way I was hurting? I was honest with myself. I thought about apology first. Would a confrontation result in one? I thought about my mother carefully, the way she handled being caught in something. She was not someone who apologized easily. She was someone who redirected, who reframed, who found reasons why what had happened was actually reasonable, or actually my fault, or actually not what it appeared to be. A confrontation would not give me an apology. It would give me a conversation in which the money would somehow become complicated and uncertain and not clearly mine. That is what confrontation would look like. So I thought about what I actually needed. Not what would feel satisfying in the moment, what I actually needed. I needed the funds for my tuition. That was first and most important. I needed to start university with what had been awarded to me. Without that, everything else was noise. So I focused on that. How do I recover what is mine? That question turned out to be more answerable than I expected. I spent time reading through the scholarship documents very carefully. I read the terms, I read the fine print. I found something important. The scholarship organization had a provision for situations where dispersed funds were misappropriated or misused. It was buried in the administrative language of the award documentation, not the letter they had sent me, but the full terms document available on their website. I had read the website carefully when I first applied. I had saved those pages. The provision stated that in cases of fund misuse, the organization could issue a replacement disbursement directly to the student's designated educational institution, bypassing the original mailing address entirely. This was not a provision meant for situations exactly like mine. It was written for broader institutional concerns. But the language was there, and language is precise. I composed an email to the scholarship office. I wrote it carefully, over 3 days, revising it many times. I did not use words like stolen or fraud or my mother. I described the situation in administrative terms. I explained that the check had been cashed, but that the funds had not been applied to educational expenses as specified in the award terms. I explained that I was now enrolled at the university and that I had a student account established in my name. I attached a copy of the original letter. I attached my enrollment confirmation from the university. I attached the information about when the check was cashed. I asked if the provision for direct disbursement to the institution was applicable to my situation, and if so, whether I could initiate that process. Then I waited. I waited while still living in the same house, eating dinner at the same table, watching my mother move through her days with no visible sign that she was carrying anything heavy. That was the hardest part. Not the waiting, but watching someone move through ordinary life while you are sitting with extraordinary knowledge. My sister came back from the trip refreshed and cheerful. She showed me photos on her phone. The resort looked beautiful. The rooms were white and clean. The pool was the kind of blue that exists only in photographs. She said it was the best trip she had ever taken. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe she did. I smiled and looked at the photos and said it looked lovely. And then I went back to waiting for my email response. The scholarship office replied after 9 days. They said they were taking my inquiry seriously. They requested additional documentation. I provided everything they asked for without delay. A second reply came 4 days later. They had reviewed my case. They confirmed that the check had been cashed and that there was no evidence the funds had been applied to the educational purposes specified in the award terms. They said that under the provisions of the scholarship agreement, they were authorized to coordinate a direct transfer to the student's university account. They asked me to confirm my student ID and the credit union account details. I confirmed everything within the hour. Then I waited again. 7 more days. Those 7 days had a particular quality to them. I was still in the house, still passing my mother in the hallway, still listening to the sounds of the kitchen, the television, the ordinary machinery of family life. But I was now on the other side of something. Not outside the family, but no longer entirely inside the logic of it either. I had taken a step that was entirely mine, made from information I had gathered myself, through a process I had initiated alone, without anyone's help, without anyone's permission. That felt significant, not triumphant, just significant, like the first time you realize you can navigate somewhere without a map because you have finally learned the streets well enough to trust yourself. The confirmation email arrived on a Thursday afternoon. I was sitting in the library at the university, which I had been visiting in the weeks before term started, just to feel comfortable in the space, to make it familiar before the pressure of coursework arrived. The email said the funds had been transferred, $32,000, in my student account, designated for tuition and housing as originally specified. I read the email twice. I closed my phone. I sat in the library for a while, surrounded by the quiet that libraries hold like something cupped in both hands. Then I went and had a cup of tea from the campus cafe. I sat outside on a bench. It was a cool afternoon, the kind that holds autumn in it even though summer is technically still present. I drank the tea slowly, and I felt something that was not quite triumph, and not quite relief, and not quite peace, but was made of pieces of all three. I had not destroyed anything. I had not humiliated anyone. I had not staged a confrontation or sent messages to relatives or posted anything that could be seen or spread. I had simply followed a process, a quiet, documented, step-by-step process, and at the end of it, what was mine again. There is a conversation I should tell you about. It happened about 2 weeks after the funds were transferred. My mother asked me one evening how I was managing my finances for university. She said she was thinking about the scholarship money. She said she had been meaning to discuss it with me. She started a sentence about how she had only been trying to help the family and that sometimes priorities overlap and that surely I could understand that things had been difficult. I let her finish. Then I said something I had thought about carefully. I said I had worked it out. I said the scholarship organization had been very helpful. I said my tuition was paid for the next 2 years. I said there was nothing she needed to worry about. She was quiet for a moment. She asked what I meant the scholarship organization. I said they had a process for ensuring the funds went where they were intended. I said it had all gone through properly. There was a long pause. She looked at me, and I could see her trying to find the edge of what I had said, trying to understand how much I knew, trying to understand what had happened. I held her gaze, and I kept my expression neutral and calm, and simply said, "My tuition is paid. I'm grateful for the scholarship." Then I excused myself and went to my room. That was the entire conversation. No accusations, no evidence laid on a table, no family tribunal, no dramatics, just a simple exchange in which I let her understand, without saying it directly, that the quiet way has its own kind of power, that someone who works carefully and without announcement can arrive at outcomes that a louder approach never could. I don't know what she told herself about what happened. I don't know what story she constructed. People who have done something they know is wrong are often very skilled at building narratives that allow them to keep living comfortably with themselves. That is not my concern. What I know is this. I started university the following month with my tuition fully covered. I had a place in student housing paid for by the stipend portion of the scholarship. I had my own account that no one else could access. And I had something harder to name, but equally important, a different understanding of myself. Because here is what that year taught me that I want to sit with for a moment. It taught me that the people who are quiet are not always the people who are weak. Sometimes the people who are quiet are the people who are gathering information, who are reading documents carefully, who are building cases brick by brick without announcing the construction. The loudest moment in a conflict is rarely the most powerful one. The most powerful moment is often the one that comes after a long, patient silence. The one that arrives without warning and without drama and simply changes the facts on the ground. I had been quiet my whole life, partly out of habit and partly out of learned caution. But in this situation, my quietness became a strategy, and the strategy worked. Not because I was clever in some dramatic way, but because I took the time to understand my options before I reacted, because I read the fine print, because I documented everything, because I asked the right questions of the right people, because I gave the process time to work instead of forcing it to move at the speed of my emotion. Emotion wanted me to act in the first 48 hours. Strategy told me to wait. Strategy was right. There is something else I want to say about this time, something about what happens after. Because people often focus on the action, the turning point, the moment of resolution, but what comes after is its own territory. What comes after is the quiet recalibration of a relationship that can never quite go back to what it was. Not because of hatred or bitterness, but because you now see the full shape of something you once only saw in pieces. My relationship with my mother changed that year, not in a visible, announced way, but in the way that relationships change when a fundamental assumption has shifted. I had assumed, in the wordless way that children assume things about their parents, that she was on my side, not in opposition to Priya, not preferring me, just on my side, in my corner, interested in my future. That assumption had now been examined and found to be something more complicated than a simple yes or no. What replaced it was something more accurate, a clearer picture, one that included warmth in some spaces and absence in others, one that included genuine love alongside genuine blind spots, one that included the possibility that someone can love you and still take from you if their own needs press urgently enough. That is a complicated thing to hold. I am still learning to hold it without it becoming the whole story of who she is to me. But I hold it honestly, because honesty, I have come to believe, is what allows you to navigate complicated things without losing yourself in them. I went home at winter break that first year. The house felt the same on the outside. The smell of it, the particular light in the kitchen at 4 in the afternoon, the creak of the third step on the staircase, all the same. But I moved through it differently, not with coolness, not with punishment, with a new kind of groundedness, the kind that comes when you have proven to yourself that you can handle something real without falling apart. I had handled it, and I knew now that I could handle other things too. That knowledge is not small. It is actually one of the most important things you can acquire when you're young. The knowledge that you have already survived something difficult. That when something hard came, you did not freeze, you did not collapse, you did not burn things down around you. You thought, and you planned, and you moved carefully, and it worked. That knowledge becomes a kind of ballast, something that keeps you upright in the future when the water gets rough. I want to say something about Priya, because this story involves her, but she is not the villain of it. She is my sister. She was given something that was not hers to have, but she was given it by someone she trusted, and I don't know how much she understood about where it came from. I have not asked her directly. That is a conversation I may have one day or may not. But I do not hold what happened against her in the way I once thought I might. She did not steal from me. She was handed something she probably assumed was freely given. The responsibility for what happened lives somewhere else. What I have with Priya now is a relationship I am still building, slowly, on new terms. Terms that I have thought about carefully and chosen deliberately rather than simply inheriting from childhood. That is perhaps the most adult thing I have done. Not the strategic recovery of the funds, but the patient rebuilding of a relationship on foundations I chose myself. I want to talk about the scholarship organization for a moment because they did something that I think deserves acknowledgement. They took my emails seriously. They asked for documentation and I provided it. They reviewed the case and they found a way within their own provisions to ensure the funds reach their intended purpose. They did not ask me to involve law enforcement. They did not ask me to pursue it through channels that would have been public and damaging and prolonged. They found the quiet path and offered it to me. I am grateful for that. It reminded me that institutions, when they are well built, have provisions for human complexity, that the people who write the fine print sometimes write it with situations like mine in mind, even if they never expected to encounter one. That doing things properly, going through the right channels, putting things in writing, following processes, is not bureaucratic cowardice. It is often the most powerful move available. I have built my adult life on that understanding. Now, 2 years out from that experience, I am in my 3rd year of university. The scholarship covered the first 2 years fully. I work part-time now to cover the remaining expenses, and I have a small bursary from the university's financial aid office. I manage my own money. I make my own choices. I have an apartment I share with 2 other students, people I chose, in a space that is entirely mine in the ways that matter. My relationship with my mother continues. I call her once a week. I visit when I can. There are moments of warmth and moments of distance, and I have made peace with the fact that this is simply the shape of what we are. Not broken, not repaired to original condition, something more honest than either. Something I chose to tend carefully rather than abandon or idealize. I don't think about the scholarship money the way I did in those first weeks. I don't carry it like a wound. I carry it like a lesson. Here is what the lesson taught me. Your resources, your achievements, your future, these belong to you, not to the family account, not to the shared narrative of what the family needs, to you. And it is not selfish to protect them. It is not ungrateful to refuse to let what you built be redirected without your consent. It is simply the act of taking yourself seriously, of insisting quietly that your future matters, that you matter. Not loudly, not with performance, but with the steady, consistent actions of someone who has decided that their life belongs to them and is willing to do the patient work of making that real. There's one more thing I want to say about the week after I found out, the week before I sent the email, the week I sat with the knowledge and asked myself what kind of person I wanted to be. I thought about anger. I thought about the version of this story where I did the loud thing, where I called the relatives, where I made it a family event, where I turned the moment of discovery into a scene. I thought about how satisfying that version might have felt for about 30 minutes. And then I thought about what would have happened after those 30 minutes. The defensiveness, the shifting of blame, the way a family system will always protect itself, even when it shouldn't. The way the person who makes the scene often becomes the one who is talked about afterward, the dramatic one, the difficult one, the one who couldn't just let it go. I thought about what I actually wanted, and what I actually wanted was my tuition paid and my future intact. Not a moment of catharsis that solved nothing, not a confession that would never fully come, not an apology that would have felt performed even if it arrived. I wanted my future, and I got it, quietly, patiently, completely. That is the story, not the story of a dramatic confrontation, not the story of a family torn apart, the story of a young woman who decided that the most important thing she could do was protect what was hers, who read the documents carefully, who asked the right questions, who waited when waiting was the right thing to do, who moved when moving became possible, who came out the other side with her tuition, her dignity, and a clearer understanding of herself than she had ever had before. That understanding has been worth more to me than the $32,000 because it travels with me into every room, into every conversation, into every moment when someone tries to tell me, implicitly or explicitly, that my resources are theirs by right. I know now what to do with that. I sit with it. I read the fine print. I find the quiet path, and I walk it, alone if necessary, without announcement, without drama, toward the future that was always mine. I am still building that future, every day, and I am building it on ground I chose and cleared and know to be solid. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. If this story reached something in you, if you recognized any part of it, if you have sat with your own version of this silence, share what you are thinking in the comments. I read everything. And if you want more stories about finding the quiet kind of strength, about patience and clarity and the long way around to what is yours, subscribe.